The woman who stole her future was not satisfied with winning. She wanted Aloan to suffer while she watched. The great moon hall glittered beneath thousands of crystal lanterns as nobles, pack leaders, and royal families filled every corner of the palace. Tonight was supposed to be the happiest night of Aloan Hartwell's life. For years she had served beside Alpha King Ronan Ashthorn. For years she had ignored the whispers that followed them through palace corridors. Yet even she could not deny the quiet hope growing inside her heart tonight. The kingdom had gathered for one reason. Ronan would finally choose his royal Luna. Music drifted through the hall. Silver banners hung from marble columns. Excitement filled the air. Aloan stood among the honored guests wearing a simple silver gown. She never cared about crowns. She never dreamed about power. She only cared about one man. And somewhere deep inside, she still believed he cared about her too. Then the ceremonial horns sounded. The crowd immediately fell silent. Ronan stepped onto the central platform. Strong, calm, regal. Every eye turned toward him, including hers. Tonight, he announced, the future of our kingdom begins. Thunderous applause followed. Then he descended from the platform and began walking through the crowd. Aloan felt her pulse quicken. Nobles exchanged knowing smiles. Even members of the council looked toward her expectantly. Everyone saw the way Ronan looked at her over the years. Everyone assumed they knew how this story ended. So did she. One step closer, then another. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe. Then Ronan walked directly past her. The smile vanished from her face. The air left her lungs. He never slowed, never hesitated, never looked back. Instead, he stopped beside Vesper Veilcrest. Cheers erupted throughout the hall. Vesper immediately lifted her chin as though she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. Ronan raised her hand before the kingdom. I have chosen my royal Luna. The applause became deafening. Aloan stood perfectly still. She felt hundreds of eyes turning toward her. Some sympathetic, others curious, a few openly amused. Humiliation burned through her chest. Yet what happened next hurt far more. Vesper stepped forward and raised her hand for silence. My king, she said sweetly. Before the celebration continues, may I share one more blessing with our people? Ronan nodded. Vesper smiled. Then she turned directly toward Aloan. Not the crowd. Not the council. Aloan. Some women spend years pretending they belong beside a king, Vesper announced. A few uncomfortable laughs echoed through the hall. Aloan felt every face turn toward her. Vesper continued. They mistake kindness for affection, attention for devotion, fantasy for destiny. The room grew awkwardly quiet. Several nobles looked away. Others watched eagerly. Vesper was not simply celebrating her victory. She was putting on a performance. And Aloan was the target. Then Vesper rested a hand against her stomach. Fortunately, the moon goddess has already confirmed the kingdom's future. Gasps exploded throughout the hall. Advisors immediately rose from their seats. Noble women covered their mouths in shock. Vesper smiled proudly. I am expecting the future heir. The crowd erupted. Congratulations echoed everywhere. Yet Vesper never stopped watching Aloan. Her eyes glittered with cruel satisfaction. Then she took a slow step forward. Do you know what I admire most about you, Aloan? She asked loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Aloan said nothing. Your persistence. The smile widened. Most women would have realized years ago they were never wanted. The words struck like ice. A stunned silence followed. Even some of Vesper's supporters appeared uncomfortable. Yet she continued. But do not worry. Once the baby arrives, people will stop comparing us. She glanced deliberately at Aloan's gown, then back to her face. Eventually, they will forget you were ever part of this story. For the first time all night, tears threatened to form. Not because of Vesper, because Ronan remained silent. He heard every word, saw every reaction, yet he did nothing. The man Aloan trusted most simply stood beside the woman tearing her apart. Something inside her finally broke. She turned and walked away before anyone could see the tears in her eyes. Behind her, the celebration resumed. Music returned. Glasses clinked. Laughter filled the hall. Nobody followed. Nobody stopped her. Alone beneath the moonlit gardens, Aloan wandered past fountains and rose bushes until the sounds of the palace faded into the distance. Only then did she allow herself to cry. Not for the crown. Not for the title. For the trust she had lost. For the future she thought she understood. A sudden wave of dizziness interrupted her thoughts. She reached for the edge of a marble fountain to steady herself. The sensation passed, then returned stronger. Her hand instinctively drifted toward her stomach. Confusion slowly gave way to realization. Her heart stopped. No, it could not be. Yet deep down, she already knew. Tears filled her eyes once again, but this time for a completely different reason. While the woman inside the palace celebrated carrying the kingdom's future heir, Aloan stood alone beneath the moon and discovered she was carrying a secret powerful enough to destroy every lie that had just been built upon the throne. The day they threw her away, they believed they were protecting the kingdom. In reality, they were destroying its future. Morning sunlight poured across the royal capital, but for Aloan Hartwell, the city had never felt darker. Everywhere she looked, preparations for Vesper's future reign filled the palace. Silver banners hung from towers. Servants carried flowers through the hallways. Musicians rehearsed for celebrations that seemed destined to last for days. The kingdom had found its future Luna. The kingdom believed it had found its future heir. Yet Aloan sat alone inside her chamber carrying a truth no one else knew. Her hand rested against her stomach. She had spent the entire night awake. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Vesper's voice. Most women would have realized years ago they were never wanted. The words still hurt. Not because she believed them, because Ronan had stood there and allowed them to happen. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Before she could answer, the door opened. Vesper entered without permission. Four attendants followed behind her carrying gifts, flowers, and bolts of expensive fabric. The room immediately felt smaller. Vesper looked radiant, victorious, untouchable. She slowly examined Aloan's chamber as though inspecting property she already owned. "I wanted to check on you," she said sweetly. "Last night looked difficult." Aloan remained seated. "What do you want?" Vesper smiled. Straight to the point. "Good." She dismissed her attendants with a wave. The moment they left, her expression changed. The warmth disappeared. The mask fell away. "Do you know what I always hated about you?" she asked quietly. Aloan said nothing. Vesper stepped closer. "You never understood your place." The words dripped with contempt. "People liked you, trusted you, listened to you." Her smile tightened. "You never had to fight for attention. It simply followed you." Suddenly everything made sense. This was never about love, never about Ronan. It was envy. Years of envy. Vesper's eyes darkened. "Do you know how many times people compared us?" she asked. "How many times they said you would make a better Luna?" Aloan looked at her in disbelief. Vesper laughed bitterly. "Exactly. You never noticed. Because people like you never notice." Then her hand moved to her stomach. "Fortunately, that problem is over." The gesture immediately felt rehearsed. Artificial. Aloan watched carefully. Vesper noticed. For the briefest second, uncertainty flickered across her face. Then it vanished. "The kingdom finally has what it needs," she continued. "A future queen. A future heir." Aloan's instincts screamed that something was wrong. Yet before she could respond, another knock echoed through the room. 3 royal guards entered. Their expressions were grim. Behind them stood a royal messenger carrying a sealed decree. Aloan immediately felt dread settle inside her chest. "Lady Aloan Hartwell," the messenger announced formally. "You are ordered to appear before the royal council." Vesper smiled. A real smile this time. Not warm, not polite, triumphant. An hour later, Aloan stood in the center of the council chamber surrounded by advisors, nobles, and senior elders. The atmosphere felt different today. Colder, deliberate, as though the outcome had already been decided. Ronan sat at the head of the chamber. Their eyes met briefly. Once, that look would have given her comfort. Today it gave her nothing. A senior council member rose to his feet. "Serious evidence has been brought before this council." Several documents were placed onto the central table. Letters, reports, financial records, witness statements. The accusations came one after another. Secret communications with foreign territories, unauthorized meetings, plans that allegedly threatened the stability of the kingdom. Aloan stared at the documents. Some signatures were false. Some dates were impossible. Others referenced events that never happened. It was absurd. Yet the council treated every page as unquestionable truth. "This is fabricated," Aloan said firmly. "Every piece of it." Another advisor frowned. "You deny all involvement?" "Yes." Her voice echoed through the chamber. "Because none of it is real." Murmurs spread through the room. Several elders exchanged uneasy glances. Even they seemed uncertain. Hope briefly flickered inside Aloan's chest. Then she turned toward Ronan. You know me. Her voice softened. Tell them. Silence followed. The entire chamber waited. Ronan looked down at the documents, then back at her. For one heartbreaking moment, she thought he might stand, might defend her, might finally trust her. Instead, he said, the council must follow the evidence. The words shattered the last piece of hope she still carried. Vesper lowered her head to hide a smile. Aloan saw it anyway. The verdict arrived less than an hour later. Exile beyond the northern territories. Immediate departure. No appeal. No delay. Several council members looked uncomfortable. One elder even attempted to object. Yet the decision stood. As guards approached, Aloan slowly placed a hand against her stomach. The gesture was subtle, almost invisible. No one noticed except Vesper. Their eyes met across the chamber. This time Vesper's smile disappeared. For the first time all day, fear appeared. Tiny, fleeting, but real. And Aloan finally understood why. Somewhere deep inside, Vesper already suspected there was another heir. One she could never control. One she could never become. Without another word, Aloan turned toward the doors. Ronan watched her leave. He never called her name. Never stopped her. Never fought for her. And as the palace doors closed behind her, the kingdom celebrated the woman pretending to carry its future, while the true future quietly walked away into exile. The child opened his eyes beneath the northern stars, and an ancient prophecy opened them with him. The carriage carrying Aloan Hartwell disappeared beyond the royal borders just before sunset. She never looked back, not because the palace no longer mattered, but because every glance toward it felt like reopening a wound. Rain followed her northward for days. The farther she traveled from the capital, the quieter the world became. The celebrations, the politics, the whispers, and the betrayals slowly faded behind her. Yet silence did not bring peace. It gave her more time to think, more time to remember. Every night, she replayed the council hearing. Ronan's face, his hesitation, the moment he chose evidence over trust. The memory hurt more than the exile itself. But whenever the pain became too heavy, Aloan placed a hand over her stomach. The tiny life growing inside her reminded her that her future no longer belonged to the people she left behind. It belonged to someone else now, someone innocent, someone who deserved better. Nearly 2 weeks later, the landscape changed. Towering pine forests replaced royal roads. Snow-capped mountains stretched across the horizon. The air felt older here, cleaner, as though the land existed beyond the reach of kings and crowns. Yet the journey had taken its toll. One cold evening, exhaustion finally overwhelmed her. A wave of dizziness struck so suddenly that she barely remained conscious long enough to stop the carriage. The world blurred. Voices faded. Darkness followed. When she opened her eyes again, warm firelight flickered across a wooden ceiling overhead. The scent of herbs filled the room. Wind whispered softly through pine trees outside. For several seconds, she simply stared upward in confusion. Then a calm voice broke the silence. You are awake. An elderly woman sat beside the bed. Silver hair framed a weathered face. Her pale blue eyes seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. Where am I? Aloan asked. Moonfall Valley, the woman replied. A place most people forgot existed. And you are? Maeve Rowan. Something about the woman felt familiar. Safe. Like a forgotten memory waiting to return. Over the following months, Moonfall Valley became more than a refuge. It became home. The villagers welcomed her without questions. Nobody cared about royal scandals. Nobody cared about exile. They cared whether she had enough firewood for winter, enough food for supper, enough kindness to heal. For the first time in years, Aloan experienced a kind of peace she never found inside palace walls. Then the dreams began. Night after night, she saw silver-robed women standing beneath moonlit skies. Ancient stone circles glowed around them. Their voices carried through the darkness, speaking words she could never fully remember upon waking. Yet one feeling always remained. They were waiting, watching, preparing. Several months later, during the first snowfall of winter, Aloan gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The moment she held him in her arms, every mile of exile suddenly felt worth enduring. Tears filled her eyes as tiny fingers wrapped around hers. The child was perfect, peaceful, beautiful, Then Maeve stepped closer and froze. What is it? Eloan asked immediately. The elderly woman's eyes remained fixed on the newborn. His eyes, she whispered. Eloan looked down. The baby slowly opened them. Silver. Not gray. Not blue. Silver. Like moonlight reflected across still water. Silence filled the room. Maeve lowered herself into a nearby chair. For the first time since Eloan met her, she looked genuinely shaken. That is impossible, she murmured. Eloan's heart began racing. What does it mean? Maeve stared at the child for a long moment before answering. For 300 years, the bloodline remained dormant. What bloodline? Eloan asked. Maeve slowly lifted her gaze. The descendants of the moon priestesses. A chill swept through the cottage despite the warmth of the fire. The baby yawned peacefully, completely unaware of the conversation unfolding around him. Maeve continued staring at him. Then she spoke words that changed everything. This child is not simply blessed. Her voice trembled slightly. He is the first sign. The first sign of what? Eloan asked. Before Maeve could answer, something unexpected happened. The silver pendant hanging around Eloan's neck suddenly glowed. Soft moonlight filled the room. The newborn's silver eyes reflected the light. And for one brief second, ancient symbols appeared above his cradle before vanishing into the air. Maeve immediately stood. Fear and wonder battled across her face. No, she whispered. It is happening far sooner than I feared. Eloan clutched her son closer. Maeve, what is happening? The old woman looked from the child to the glowing pendant. Then back again. An ancient prophecy is waking up. Outside, snow continued falling across Moonfall Valley. But far beyond the mountains, hidden beneath the royal capital, an ancient relic buried beneath the palace suddenly pulsed with silver light for the first time in 300 years. The child who was supposed to live quietly in exile was beginning to attract the attention of destiny itself. 3 years passed faster than Eloan Hartwell ever imagined. The pain that once followed her through every morning slowly faded into something quieter. Not forgotten, simply transformed. Moonfall Valley became home. The villagers became family. And at the center of her world stood Lucian. From the moment he learned to walk, people noticed there was something unusual about him. It was not only his silver eyes. It was the way animals trusted him instantly. Birds landed near him without fear. Deer wandered from the forest and stood calmly beside him. Even injured creatures seemed comforted by his presence. At first, everyone treated the strange occurrences as harmless coincidences. Then the impossible moments began. One spring afternoon, a violent storm rolled across the valley. Dark clouds swallowed the mountains. Wind bent the trees. Villagers rushed to secure livestock and supplies before the rain arrived. During the chaos, 6-year-old Lucian wandered into the center of the village square. Eloan spotted him immediately and hurried forward. Before she could reach him, the boy stopped and lifted his face toward the sky. The storm suddenly halted. Not gradually, not naturally. It simply stopped. The dark clouds above Moonfall Valley separated, creating a perfect circle of blue sky directly above the child. Sunlight poured through the opening like liquid gold. Beyond the valley, thunder still echoed across distant mountains. Yet Lucian stood beneath calm skies. No one spoke for several seconds. Villagers stared in disbelief. Some crossed themselves. Others whispered prayers beneath their breath. By evening, the entire valley was discussing what they had witnessed. Yet Maeve remained unusually quiet. Later that night, she invited Eloan to her cottage. Several ancient books lay open across the wooden table. Their pages appeared fragile with age. Strange symbols covered every surface. There are things I hoped would never happen during our lifetime, Maeve admitted softly. Eloan looked down at one of the books. A faded illustration showed a young child standing beneath moonlight while wolves knelt around him. Her stomach tightened. The child looked remarkably similar to Lucian. Who is this? She asked. Maeve's expression grew solemn. According to the oldest records, every few centuries a child is born carrying the direct blessing of the moon goddess. Silence filled the room. You think that child is Lucian? Eloan asked. Maeve slowly closed the book. I do not think. Her voice lowered. I am beginning to fear it. Fear. The word startled Eloan. Why fear? Maeve walked toward the window and stared into the darkness. Because blessings attract attention. The answer lingered heavily in the room. Over the following months, more unusual events occurred. Flowers bloomed wherever Lucian spent long periods playing. Lost travelers somehow found their way to safety after following mysterious silver lights through the forest. Sick animals recovered unusually quickly whenever the boy sat beside them. Word spread beyond the valley. Merchants carried stories southward. Travelers repeated rumors around campfires. Some claimed the child was a miracle. Others claimed he was a legend reborn. By the end of the year, tales of the silver-eyed boy had reached territories hundreds of miles away. Then the visitors arrived. Scholars, historians, elders from forgotten packs. They traveled great distances hoping to learn whether the stories were true. Most left with more questions than answers. One elderly scholar remained longer than the others. Before departing, he pulled Maeve aside. If the old prophecies are real, he warned, the kingdom will not remain unchanged for much longer. Those words haunted Aloan. She had spent 3 years protecting her son from the world. Now the world seemed to be searching for him. Then, on the night of Lucian's 6th birthday, everything changed. The silver pendant hanging around Aloan's neck suddenly began glowing brighter than ever before. Moonlight filled the cottage. Lucian stared at the light in amazement. The glow expanded into the air, forming a single ancient symbol above the room. Maeve saw it and immediately turned pale. Aloan had never seen fear in the old woman's eyes before. "What does it mean?" she asked. Maeve stared at the glowing symbol, then at Lucian, then back again. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "The summons has begun." Outside, the wind suddenly fell silent. The forest stopped moving. Even the night seemed to hold its breath. Because somewhere far beyond Moonfall Valley, the ancient forces that had slept for centuries were finally beginning to wake. The moon goddess did not choose a king. She did not choose a queen. She chose a child. The summons arrived exactly 30 days later. No messenger delivered it. No rider crossed the mountains carrying royal seals. Instead, the message appeared beneath the full moon. Aloan stepped outside her cottage just before midnight after feeling a strange pull she could not explain. Moonfall Valley lay silent beneath silver light. Every house stood dark. Every tree stood motionless. Then she saw it. The ancient stone circle overlooking the valley was glowing. Silver symbols illuminated the weathered stones one by one, casting pale light across the hillside. Aloan's heart immediately began racing. She hurried toward the circle. Lucian followed close behind, unusually quiet. Maeve was already waiting when they arrived. The elderly woman's expression carried both wonder and concern. "It has started," she whispered. Before Aloan could ask what she meant, the ground beneath the circle began humming softly. Silver light flowed across symbols carved into the ancient stones. The pendant hanging around Aloan's neck grew warm. Then a beam of moonlight descended from the heavens and struck the center of the circle. The entire valley seemed to hold its breath. Lucian instinctively stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed into the center of the circle, the light intensified. Gasps escaped from the villagers gathering along the hillside. No one had expected this, not even Maeve. Moonlight surrounded the boy completely. Silver symbols began rotating around him in the air. Ancient words appeared above the circle, written in a language no one had spoken for centuries. Yet somehow everyone understood their meaning. "The chosen heir has been found." Silence followed, complete and absolute. Aloan stared at the glowing words. Her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. The chosen heir. Not a future king. Not a future Luna. Something older. Something greater. Maeve slowly lowered herself to one knee. Villagers followed immediately. One after another, they bowed their heads toward the child standing inside the circle. Lucian looked around in confusion. "Why is everyone doing that?" he asked. No one answered. The moonlight continued shining around him. Then the final symbol appeared above the circle. Unlike the others, this one caused Maeve's face to lose all color. Aloan noticed immediately. "What does it mean?" she asked. Maeve swallowed hard. According to the oldest prophecies, the chosen heir is not selected to inherit a throne. The old woman struggled to continue. He is selected to decide who deserves one. A chill swept through the gathering. Suddenly, the meaning became terrifyingly clear. This was bigger than kingdoms, bigger than bloodlines, bigger than politics. The moon goddess herself had chosen Lucian as the judge of a future no one could yet see. Hundreds of miles away, deep beneath the royal capital, the ancient relic hidden beneath the palace erupted with silver light. Scholars rushed into the underground chamber. Priests gathered. Advisors abandoned meetings. The entire palace descended into chaos. For 3 centuries the relic had remained dormant. Now it blazed brighter than ever. Symbols appeared across its surface. The same symbols glowing around Lucian. Ronan Ashthorne arrived moments later. The instant he entered the chamber, every scholar stepped aside. The relic recognized him immediately. Silver light filled the room. Then a vision appeared above the ancient stone. A young boy standing beneath moonlight. Silver eyes. Dark hair. Calm expression. Ronan froze. The image lasted only seconds before fading. Yet it was enough. He knew that face. He had seen it in sketches arriving from the north. He had studied those sketches more times than he cared to admit. The same child now appeared inside a relic older than the kingdom itself. One scholar finally found his voice. "Your Majesty," he whispered. "The prophecy has chosen a successor." Ronan never looked away from where the image had vanished. "That boy is not my successor." The scholar shook his head slowly. His face had gone pale. "No, Your Majesty." He swallowed hard. "The prophecy says the child will determine who remains worthy of the crown." For the first time in generations, genuine fear settled inside the royal palace. Because if the ancient prophecies were true, the future of the kingdom no longer rested in the hands of kings, councils, or nobles. It rested in the hands of a 6-year-old boy whose existence most of them did not even know. The prophecy frightened the kingdom, but one small habit shattered the king's heart. The prophecy changed the kingdom overnight. By sunrise, rumors had spread through every corridor of the royal palace. Advisors whispered behind closed doors. Nobles gathered in private chambers. Scholars searched records untouched for generations. Everyone wanted answers. No one had them. Deep beneath the palace, the ancient relic continued glowing with an intensity no living person had ever witnessed. Ronan Ashthorne stood alone before it long after everyone else had left. Silver light reflected across the stone walls, casting shifting shadows around him. For years he had ruled with certainty. Every decision measured. Every action deliberate. Yet lately uncertainty followed him everywhere. It had started with a name. Aloan. Then came the stories from the north. The silver-eyed child. The prophecy. Now the relic itself seemed determined to drag the past back into his life. He closed his eyes briefly. Memories surfaced immediately. Aloan laughing during harvest festivals. Aloan challenging him during council meetings when everyone else simply agreed. Aloan seeing the man beneath the crown when few others ever bothered to look. The memories had become impossible to escape. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. One of the palace historians entered carrying several old ledgers. "Your Majesty," the man said carefully. "You asked us to investigate the records surrounding Lady Aloan's exile." Ronan opened his eyes. And the historian hesitated. That hesitation alone told Ronan something was wrong. Several documents appear inconsistent. Ronan's expression darkened. "Explain." The historian laid several reports across a stone table. The accusations relied heavily on witness statements and correspondence. He swallowed nervously. Some of those records appear altered. A cold feeling settled inside Ronan's chest. For years he had accepted the council's conclusions. He had trusted the process, trusted the evidence, trusted the people presenting it. Suddenly that trust felt dangerously misplaced. Hours later, Ronan searched the palace archives personally. Dust-covered shelves stretched endlessly through forgotten corridors. Page after page passed beneath his hands. Then he found it, a sealed report hidden beneath unrelated records. The document came from a handwriting specialist. Its conclusion was unmistakable. Several signatures used against Aloan could not be authenticated. Ronan stared at the page. His stomach sank. Someone knew. Someone buried the truth. And he had never questioned it. That realization hurt more than he expected. Aloan had stood before him and told him she was innocent. He remembered her eyes. The disappointment. The heartbreak. He had failed her. That evening, unable to focus, Ronan returned to his private chambers. The room felt strangely empty. His gaze settled on a small wooden box resting on a shelf. Slowly, he opened it. Inside rested a simple silver bracelet. Aloan had given it to him years ago. Nothing valuable. Nothing royal. Just a reminder that even kings deserved peace. Ronan sat heavily in his chair. The bracelet felt heavier than gold. Then another knock interrupted the silence. A palace physician entered carrying medical records. "Your Majesty," the physician said carefully, "there is something you should know regarding Lady Vesper." Ronan immediately looked up. "What is it?" The physician hesitated. "Historical medical reviews reveal no evidence supporting her pregnancy announcement." Silence filled the room. Ronan stared at him. "Explain." "The records indicate Lady Vesper was never expecting a child." The words landed like a hammer. The future heir. The celebration. The announcement before the kingdom. None of it had been true. Every piece of the foundation built 3 years ago suddenly began collapsing. Later that night, another messenger arrived from the north carrying updated reports about the chosen heir. Among the documents was a charcoal sketch created by a traveling scholar. Ronan unfolded it absent-mindedly, then froze. The drawing showed Lucian sitting beneath a tree reading a book. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then Ronan noticed the boy's hand. According to the scholar's notes, before turning each page, Lucian tapped the edge of the book 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. Ronan's breathing stopped. He looked again, then again. A strange ache spread through his chest. That habit, that exact habit. He had done it his entire life. Ever since childhood. Whenever he read, whenever he studied, whenever he was nervous. Advisors used to tease him about it. Tutors noticed it. His father noticed it. Nobody taught him. It simply belonged to him. Yet here it was, in a 6-year-old boy living hundreds of miles away. Tap, tap, tap. The room seemed to disappear around him. The sketch trembled slightly in his hand. For months he had tried convincing himself that resemblance could be coincidence. Silver eyes could be coincidence. Dark hair could be coincidence. Timing could be coincidence. But not this. Not something so small, so personal, so completely his. For the first time, Ronan stopped wondering if Lucian might be his son. Deep inside, he already knew the answer. And that truth hurt more than any prophecy ever could. Because somewhere beyond the northern mountains lived a boy who carried his eyes, his habits, and perhaps even his blood. A boy who had spent 6 years growing up without a father. And Ronan had no one to blame except himself. The white guardian bowed before the child. But it was a tiny habit that convinced the king he was looking at his own son. The capital had never seen crowds like this before. Long before sunrise, people flooded the streets surrounding the southern gates. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Noble families filled balconies overlooking the main avenue. Travelers arrived from territories hundreds of miles away. Everyone wanted to witness the arrival of the child chosen by the moon goddess. Stories about Lucian had spread across the kingdom for months. Some called him a miracle. Others called him a myth. A few whispered that he might change the future of the throne itself. By midday, anticipation had become unbearable. Inside the palace, Ronan Ashthorne stood before a tall window overlooking the city below. The streets appeared like rivers of people stretching toward the horizon. Yet he barely noticed them. His thoughts remained fixed on a charcoal sketch resting inside his study. A silver-eyed boy, a book in his lap. 3 taps before every page turned. Tap, tap, tap. The memory haunted him. The habit was too familiar, too personal, too impossible. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Your Majesty," a royal guard announced. "The northern delegation has arrived." The crowd erupted before the procession even reached the gates. Carriages rolled slowly into the city while thousands surged forward for a better view. Excitement spread like wildfire. Children climbed onto their parents' shoulders. Merchants abandoned business completely. Every eye focused on the lead carriage. It finally stopped at the center of the avenue. Silence swept through the gathering. Then the carriage door opened. A small boy stepped into the sunlight. Lucian blinked at the enormous city surrounding him. His silver eyes reflected the afternoon sky. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then whispers began spreading through the crowd. The silver eyes, the calm expression, the strange sense of presence surrounding him. Some people instinctively lowered their heads. Others simply stared. Yet before anyone could react further, a deep howl echoed across the city. The sound rolled through the streets like distant thunder. Every conversation died instantly. Another howl followed. Older, stronger, ancient. Heads turned toward the hills beyond the city walls. Then the impossible happened. A massive white wolf emerged from the crowd. No one knew where it came from. Guards had never seen it enter the capital. Yet there it was. Its fur shimmered beneath the sunlight like fresh snow. Its silver eyes seemed older than the kingdom itself. Elderly citizens immediately recognized the markings covering its coat. Some began trembling. Others whispered prayers. The White Guardian, an old scholar, breathed. It cannot be. According to legend, the White Guardian appeared only when the moon goddess personally intervened in the fate of the realm. Most believed the story was a myth. Until now, the enormous wolf moved slowly through the avenue as people stepped aside in shock. It approached Lucian directly. Eloan immediately moved closer to her son, protective instincts rising inside her. Yet Lucian remained calm. The wolf stopped before him. Their eyes met. Then, to the astonishment of the entire kingdom, the White Guardian slowly lowered itself and bowed. Gasps erupted everywhere. Several nobles dropped to their knees. Others stared in disbelief. The White Guardian had never bowed before a king, never before a queen, yet it bowed before a child. High above the avenue, Ronan felt the blood drain from his face. Even from the palace window, he understood the significance. Every prophecy, every ancient warning, every impossible story suddenly felt real. Lucian smiled at the giant wolf. "Hello," he said softly. The wolf closed its eyes peacefully, as though greeting someone it had been waiting centuries to meet. Then the second carriage door opened. Eloan stepped into view. Recognition spread through the crowd like a wave. The exiled Omega had returned. Yet she did not return broken. She did not return seeking acceptance. She returned carrying dignity, strength, and a quiet confidence that commanded attention without asking for it. For a brief moment, her eyes lifted toward the palace, toward the window where Ronan stood watching. The distance between them felt larger than the 6 years separating their lives. Then something unexpected happened. One of the royal historians rushing through the crowd accidentally dropped a thick, leather-bound book. It landed near Lucian's feet. The boy immediately bent down, picked it up carefully, and examined the damaged cover. Then, completely unaware that anyone was watching, he tapped the edge of the book 3 times with his fingers. Tap, tap, tap. The world seemed to stop. Ronan's breath caught. His hands tightened against the stone windowsill. Not similar. Not close. Exact. The same rhythm. The same unconscious motion. The same habit that had followed him his entire life. The king felt his vision blur slightly. The crowd. The wolf. The prophecy. The city. Everything faded away. There was only the boy. A boy carrying his eyes. His mannerisms. His habits. His blood. For the first time since hearing Lucian's name, Ronan stopped hoping. Stopped wondering. Stopped doubting. Deep inside, he knew. The child standing below was his son. At that exact moment, the silver pendant resting against Eloan's chest burst with light. Bells across the capital began ringing on their own. One tower after another. One street after another. The city froze. Because everyone understood the same thing at the same moment. The prophecy had not come to honor the kingdom. The prophecy had come to judge it. And standing at the center of that judgment was the boy the king should have known from the very beginning. The truth finally came into the light. But the deepest wound had nothing to do with the throne. The gathering of the moon began at sunset. Thousands filled the grand plaza surrounding the palace. Torches illuminated ancient stone pathways, while silver banners swayed gently in the evening breeze. Representatives from every major territory stood alongside scholars, nobles, merchants, and ordinary citizens. No one wanted to miss what happened next. At the center of the plaza stood an ancient platform carved centuries before the kingdom existed. Tonight it would host the ceremony of truth, a ritual so old that most people believed it was only a legend. Lucian stood quietly beside Eloan as they approached the platform. Despite the enormous crowd, he appeared completely calm. The silver pendant around Eloan's neck glowed softly with every step. Across the plaza, Ronan watched them closely. The closer they came, the harder it became to ignore the emotions building inside him. Regret, hope, fear. For years he had believed his greatest responsibility was protecting the kingdom. Now he wondered if he had failed the people closest to him instead. The High Keeper of Moon Traditions stepped forward carrying a silver staff. Instantly the crowd fell silent. Tonight, the Elder announced, the moon goddess calls for truth where deception once stood. The ancient staff struck the stone platform once. Silver light spread outward in every direction. Symbols illuminated beneath everyone's feet. Gasps echoed across the plaza. Then the impossible happened. The relic hidden beneath the palace answered. A pillar of silver light rose into the night sky before descending directly onto the ceremonial platform. Lucian looked upward. The light surrounded him, but caused no harm. Instead, the symbols around the plaza began moving. Ancient words formed in the air above the crowd. Let truth stand unhidden. Silence followed. Then a voice suddenly emerged from the audience. I cannot remain silent any longer. Heads turned. An elderly palace archivist stepped forward. His hands trembled as he approached the platform. 3 years ago, I reviewed the evidence used against Lady Eloan Hartwell. His voice cracked. Several documents were clearly suspicious. Shock rippled through the crowd. The archivist continued. I reported my concerns to a senior royal advisor. My report disappeared. Murmurs spread everywhere. Before anyone could react, another person stepped forward. Then another. A former messenger. A palace clerk. A council assistant. One after another, forgotten details resurfaced. Small inconsistencies. Missing records. Altered schedules. Individually, they meant little. Together, they formed a disturbing pattern. Eloan listened quietly. Every revelation confirmed what she had always known. Yet something felt strange. The evidence was pointing beyond Vesper. Much farther beyond. The crowd slowly realized it as well. Then a final witness emerged. A retired council secretary carrying a sealed ledger. The woman approached the platform and handed the book directly to the High Keeper. This was hidden before the exile hearing, she explained. The elder carefully opened the ledger. Several pages contained private instructions signed by one of the kingdom's most trusted officials. Lord Garrick Thornwell. Gasps erupted instantly. Garrick was not merely an advisor. He had served 3 kings. He was considered one of the most respected men in the kingdom. The High Keeper continued reading. Every sentence made the plaza quieter. Witness statements altered. Reports removed. Evidence redirected. Not to help Vesper. To manipulate her. The realization stunned everyone. Vesper had been ambitious, jealous, reckless, but she had never orchestrated the entire conspiracy alone. Lord Garrick had used her desire for power to remove Eloan from the path. Because according to ancient records hidden within the ledger, Eloan's bloodline connected directly to the Moon Priestesses. If she remained near the throne, the prophecy could eventually awaken. Garrick had spent years trying to prevent exactly that. Across the plaza, Vesper's face turned pale. She had believed she controlled the game. Now she discovered she had been a piece on someone else's board all along. Meanwhile, Ronan felt as though the ground beneath him had disappeared. Every truth revealed another failure. Another moment he should have questioned. Another warning he ignored. Then his attention drifted toward Lucian once more. The boy stood quietly beside Eloan while the kingdom argued around him. Unbothered by politics. Unaware of how many lives had been shaped by decisions made before he was born. One of the palace scholars gently offered Lucian a small notebook so he could draw while the proceedings continued. The boy thanked him politely and opened the cover. Before turning the first page, he tapped the edge 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. Ronan felt the air leave his lungs. The habit again. Small, meaningless to everyone else. Devastating to him. Suddenly, he imagined all the moments he had missed. Teaching Lucian how to read. Watching him take his first steps. Listening to his endless questions. Hearing him laugh during long summer afternoons. Memories that should have belonged to him. Memories that never would. For the first time that evening, Ronan stopped thinking like a king. He thought like a father. And the regret nearly broke him. Then the silver light surrounding Lucian suddenly intensified. The entire crowd turned toward the boy. Ancient symbols appeared once more above the platform. This time only a single sentence formed. The true test has not yet begun. The words hung in the air for several seconds before fading away. Uneasy silence followed. Because the conspiracy had finally been exposed. The lies had finally been revealed. Yet according to the prophecy itself, something even greater was still waiting ahead. The moon goddess never asked who deserved the crown. She asked who deserved a second chance. The grand plaza stood silent beneath a sky filled with silver light. Thousands of people remained frozen where they stood. Nobles, elders, merchants, pack leaders. Every person who had witnessed the prophecy now watched the 3 figures standing at the center of the ancient platform. Eloan, Ronan, Lucian. The silver symbols surrounding them continued glowing softly across the stone. Above the city, the full moon shone brighter than anyone could remember. The truth had finally been revealed. The conspiracy had been exposed. Lord Garrick's manipulation had collapsed. Vesper's lies had unraveled. The kingdom knew exactly who had been wronged. Yet no one moved, because everyone sensed the real ending had not arrived yet. Lucian stood between his parents, looking from one to the other. Unlike the crowd, he seemed completely untouched by politics, power, or prophecy. He only saw two people: a mother he loved, and a man who looked at him as though he had found something precious after believing it lost forever. The ancient symbols suddenly brightened. Silver light spiraled upward from the platform. Gasps echoed through the plaza. Then words appeared above the gathering. Not spoken, written in moonlight itself. Let the chosen heir decide. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Even the high keeper looked stunned. For centuries, rulers, councils, and priests had interpreted the will of the moon goddess. Yet now the prophecy itself was placing the final decision into the hands of a child. Lucian stared at the glowing words. "Decide what?" he asked quietly. No one answered. Then the silver light shifted again. Images appeared within the glow. The entire kingdom watched. First came the image of Aloan standing alone beyond the northern border years earlier. Then Lucian as a baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. Then long winters, difficult journeys, countless nights where she chose hope instead of bitterness. The crowd watched in silence. Next came images of Ronan, sitting alone in his study after learning the truth, reading hidden reports, holding the bracelet Aloan once gave him, staring at sketches of a child he had never met. Then the images changed. Ronan unfolded a charcoal sketch showing a silver-eyed boy reading beneath a tree. The kingdom watched as the child tapped the edge of a book 3 times before turning the page. Tap, tap, tap. Another image appeared. A much younger Ronan sitting in the royal library years earlier. He did the exact same thing. Tap, tap, tap. Murmurs swept through the crowd. The resemblance was undeniable. The prophecy was showing what no council could dispute and no lie could erase. Father and son. The images continued. Ronan standing at the palace window watching Lucian arrive. Lucian picking up a fallen book and repeating the same unconscious habit. Tap, tap, tap. Then came the image of Ronan realizing the truth. Not as a king, as a father. Tears filled the eyes of many spectators. Because the prophecy was showing something greater than mistakes. It was showing what came after them. Growth, humility, change. The images disappeared. Silence returned. Then Lucian looked directly at Ronan. The Alpha King felt his chest tighten. The entire kingdom seemed to disappear around them. There was only the boy. Ronan slowly lowered himself to one knee. Not because protocol demanded it. Not because prophecy required it. Because it felt right. For the first time in years, he stood before someone without a crown between them. "I cannot change what happened," Ronan said quietly. His voice carried across the silent plaza. "I cannot return the years I lost." Emotion tightened his throat. "But if the moon goddess gives me the opportunity, I will spend every day proving I can be better than the man I was." The words were simple, honest, human. Lucian studied him carefully. Then he asked the question no one expected. "If my mother had never come back, would you still be sorry?" The crowd froze. Even Aloan felt her breath catch. Ronan did not answer immediately. He could have chosen the easier response, the safer response. Instead, he chose the truth. Yes. His voice remained steady. "Because losing her was the greatest mistake of my life. But losing you is the regret I will carry for the rest of my days." Silence followed. Long, heavy, real. Ronan looked down briefly before speaking again. "I missed your first steps, your first words, the stories you wanted to tell, the questions you wanted answered. I missed every ordinary moment a father should treasure." His voice broke slightly. "And I would give every crown I own to have even one of those days back." Tears appeared in the eyes of people throughout the plaza. Because for the first time, they were not watching a king speak. They were watching a father mourn the years he could never recover. Lucian looked toward Aloan. She met his gaze and smiled gently, not giving permission, not making the choice for him, trusting him, the same way she always had. Lucian looked back at Ronan. Then he did something so simple that it shattered the emotional walls surrounding the entire plaza. He held out his hand. "Then you can start now." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Ronan stared at the small hand extended toward him. For a moment, Tears blurred his vision. Then he carefully took it. The instant their hands touched, the entire platform erupted with silver light. Bells across the kingdom began ringing. The white guardian wolf lifted its head and released a powerful howl that echoed through the mountains. Above them, the final words of the prophecy appeared in the moonlit sky. The choice has been made. Applause exploded throughout the capital. People embraced. Some openly cried. Others simply smiled through tears, because they finally understood what the prophecy had always been testing. Not power, not bloodlines. Character. The courage to admit failure. The strength to forgive. The wisdom to choose love over pride. Ronan rose slowly and looked toward Aloan. Years of pain still stood between them. Healing would not happen in a single night. Trust would need time. Yet for the first time since she left the kingdom, Aloan saw the man she once believed existed beneath the crown. Not a king, not an alpha, a man willing to earn what he had lost. Moonlight surrounded the three of them as Lucian held both of their hands. Above the city, the symbols faded one by one into the stars. The prophecy was over. The judgment had ended. And as the kingdom celebrated beneath the blessing of the moon goddess, Aloan realized something she never expected. The greatest victory was not returning with a crown. It was returning strong enough to choose her own future.